Jamie, and I'm the Unicorn Recruiter. I've worked in global talent acquisition for 15 years, both as an in-house and as an agency recruiter. I'm also a leadership development coach, and I now help companies hire their top talent, also known as unicorns, and help job seekers find their next position. Join me each week for tips and tricks and how to navigate not only finding your next position, but also career development. This is the Unicorn Recruiter Podcast. Hi everyone, welcome to the Unicorn Recruiter Podcast. Today I'm going to talk about biases in recruiting. So this could easily be like an hour-long podcast, so it's not going to be. Buckle up. So it is going to be a little bit longer than my typical episodes. I have covered this topic over the last several years. I've written articles on it. I've taught courses on it. And it's one of those topics that it can be a little touchy unless you've truly been affected by it. And I think in a lot of cases, most people don't know if they have been or not. And I say that because as a candidate interviewing with a company, you don't necessarily know all the behind the scenes things that go on. You don't know the discussions. You probably don't see the biases. The recruiting and HR people are probably the ones that are most affected by it. I quite honestly have stopped working with clients because of it. Over the years, it's one of those things that you probably see more in recruiting in HR or as a hiring manager than you would see as a candidate. But I still think it's something that we should all be aware of because everyone works, and at some point you may be in a position of hiring or a team member on an interview panel. So it's something that I like to educate people on and have people be familiar with, because whether or not they experience it themselves, I don't want people participating in it either. So the more we are aware of our own biases and of others and can call them out and kind of keep each other accountable, I think the better things get. So there's no improvement if we don't admit that there are some issues in the first place. So when I talk about unconscious biases, I'm talking about things that we are biased against that we don't even know. And in some cases we might, like there's a couple that I think people kind of do know, but they just don't know that it's actually a bias. So there's a ton, but I'm going to cover some specifically. The first one is age bias. So I talked about this a little bit in a social media post on LinkedIn last year, and it kind of blew up a little bit. And I will tell you, there were a lot of people that chimed in and said, yeah, I know I was discriminated against because of my age, and the hiring manager, flat out said, like, how long till you retire, which, by the way, can never be asked in an interview. But I will say from my perspective as both an internal and external recruiter, the age biases that I see are often not younger people discriminating against older candidates. It is usually, again, this is my experience, but usually it is older hiring managers that discriminate against people that are their same age or slightly younger. And I say that because there's a lot of this within an internal organization, like succession planning and planning for the future and hiring for your backfill and making sure that there's runway on your team, that if someone were to leave, you have longevity, you have people that can step in. And I see this more with the older managers that they don't want to hire someone their age or slightly younger because they know that they're knocking on a retirement's door. They don't want to put someone in a potential succession position that is only going to be around for a couple of years. How I combat that is, the average tenure in a position is 18 months, 24 months, maybe 36 months if we're lucky, 3 years. Most people don't stay in a position for 25 years. That just doesn't really happen anymore. So that's one of the things that I typically discourage against. The other thing is, we don't know how long someone wants to work, and I've had people that were, 5 years into their career and all of a sudden came into a huge inheritance and decided that they were done working. Doesn't happen real often, but it does. Or they completely changed careers 12 months in. I have hired plenty of recruiters in my time that had HR degrees or had marketing degrees and thought that they wanted to be in recruiting, and 6 months, 12 months, a year and a half in, they decided it wasn't for them and they checked out. So age really has nothing to do with someone's longevity in a position. I think typically in these types of situations, I've guided the hiring manager to ask questions more along the lines of, what type of career development are you seeking? What professional development are you seeking? What can I offer you? And if that matches with what the candidate is looking for, then I don't care if they are 63 and a half, they're 75, if they can do the job, they're qualified, and what they're looking for in terms of career and professional development match what that position is looking for. It should not matter how old they are. So I have hired people older than me. I have hired people decades older than me. I have seen other managers hire people much, much older than them. Not saying that younger managers don't discriminate against people that are older. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in my experience, it's typically the older managers that are looking for someone younger that can kind of step into their role should they retire or move on to a different position. Again, my experience, not saying that's always the case. It goes all ways. The other one that I see quite a bit is called the like me bias, and there's a couple different names for this, but like me is the one that I've heard the most and the one that I use. And I see this a lot, specifically in technical industries where managers want to hire someone with a very similar background to them or a very similar background to their team. And I see this a lot in IT, in engineering, in some of those really niche technical areas. They want candidates from specific colleges, they want college athletes, or they want people that have been on multiple clubs or specific types of clubs in college, or have come from specific companies. And those are one of the things that I really strongly advise against. And for a few reasons. If we only hire from Ivy League colleges, for example, we're going to predominantly get one type of candidate. We're not getting diverse candidates. Everyone on the team is going to look the same. Just economic factors, there's racial factors that come into play there. And I would say I see this a lot, like I said, specifically in technical areas where a college is really well known for one specific program or a couple specific technical programs. And the urge to go and recruit out of that particular university or out of another company is really strong. So this is something where kind of your diversity and inclusion metrics come in, and those efforts where you need to look at multiple different colleges, you need to look at different technical programs, you need to look at different backgrounds to fill some of those positions, so that you don't end up with 17 people on a team that all have the same educational background, and you really have no diversity and no out-of-the-box thinking because everyone has a very similar background. The other that I see quite a bit is halo and horns. And this typically, I've obviously been a tech recruiter for a very long time, so I speak specifically to that industry, but I have seen it in other industries as well, where, the halo is, there can be so many red flags about a candidate. I've seen candidates that had, multiple job changes in 1 year. I had one candidate that I don't think worked longer than 3 or 4 months in a year, but they had didn't work longer at one company for more than 3 or 4 months, so they had 3 or 4 jobs in the last year. But they had a very niche technical skill set, a technology that wasn't incredibly prevalent, and that piece, that technical skill, outweighed all the other red flags. And the other red flags were, the position was on site. They were going to have to move across the country. They hadn't had to move for any of their other jobs. They had been in the same city forever and ever. Couldn't really give a reason why they'd want to move, other than the fact that maybe they, exhausted their options in their area because they had changed jobs 3 or 4 times in that last year. And the team wanted to move forward and hire them because they had this skill set. So it's stuff like that, the halo shows up because they've got one really specific skill set that we're looking for, that anything else just kind of falls to the wayside. The horns effect is where there's one piece where we're kind of on the fence about, and it overshadows all of the other positives of the candidate. So I have seen this before in that the candidate was going to have to drive 45 minutes in one way for a job. So we decided we didn't want to move forward with them, even though they were great, because we didn't think that they would want to drive or relocate, even though they had told us multiple times that they were open to. Just things like that kind of outshine the good aspects that the candidate has to offer. The other one, I did write an article about this. It's in the Thomson Reuters Cost Management All Women's Edition for 2023. So there's a plug for that magazine. But I spoke specifically about gender bias. And again, speaking specifically to the tech and manufacturing industry, when we would get in, as a recruiting team, or we would meet with the hiring managers and the interview team, and we would get a position in for, a project manager or an IT developer or an engineer, and I would meet with the team, and they would say, when this candidate comes in and he has this, and we're looking for this in him, and it was all male pronouns. But then I would get in an HR position or an admin position, and she will be able to do this. She should have this experience. We already put that gender bias in our mindset that we were going to hire predominantly male for technical skill sets or female for your more stereotypical female roles. So I years ago switched to only using they them pronouns when I was talking about positions. But there's also some gender bias that kind of comes into play that we don't really necessarily know that we do. And one of the examples that I gave specifically in my article was I was interviewing for a position with a male manager, and he used sports acronyms and sports metaphors, and there were some that I just had no idea. And it doesn't necessarily mean because I'm female and I don't know about sports. I just don't specifically follow those sports. I do follow other sports. I don't follow golf. I did not know what a mulligan was. I had to go look it up. So it's those types of things that just being more aware of some of the terminology that you're using, some of the assumptions that you're using, not trying to paint the picture of the candidate and choose the gender before the candidates even show up. And then just speaking to the candidates when they're there as real people is something that I think we could probably do a little bit to combat some of that gender bias. And then lastly, the last one I'm going to talk about today is name bias. And I do see this a lot, or I guess I have seen this a lot now that I'm on my own, not as much, but candidates that have different names, and this brings into play racial and cultural bias. And I've coached new recruiters, and I've worked with new recruiters who have said, Jimmy, I'm not calling this candidate because I don't know how to say their name. I have done this for a very long time, and I will tell you that I've never had one person ever be offended when I called them. They answered and they said, "Hi, this is Jamie. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Can you please tell me how to pronounce your name so I don't butcher it?" And every candidate I've done that to has said, "Yeah, absolutely," or "Call me Joe. That's my nickname," or "I go by my middle name. It's just I put my professional or my full name on my resume," or something like that. I've never had a candidate once ever be offended. And I think when we see names that aren't your stereotypical, I'm just gonna say English names, right? There's that bias because we either automatically assume that they are of a different background, or they're, in a lot of cases, I've seen recruiters and hiring managers assume that they're not U.S. citizens and that they can't work for a company that doesn't offer sponsorship. And there's that hesitation to call someone and not know how to pronounce their name. So use my tip if that is the case, and flat out ask them, "How do I pronounce your name?" I've never had anyone be offended. So those are the major biases that I see in recruiting. There are plenty of others that we could go into detail. Maybe I'll do another episode on biases. But these are the main ones that I run into. I hope that this helps. The more that we talk about our biases and the things that we run into and the things that we see and hold ourselves and each other accountable, I think the better the job market will get for all of us. So keep all of these in mind the next time you are interviewing candidates for another position. And I hope that you all have a great week.